We've had a number of hearings now on both sides of the Atlantic in Europe and the US, and so far nothing really major has been done by the authorities. But I think each time the stakes get higher and the heat gets higher. And last time, a few times earlier, Congress wasn't really ready, and the tech companies were able to just dazzle them with technology, algorithms and such like that. I think this time could be different. And I think there's two key questions that I hope this hearing will answer, and certainly most of America should expect it to answer. The first is, do we want the internet to be regulated by a handful of technology companies with their algorithms, or do we want it to be properly, formally regulated by the government, an elected government? And the second is, are these social media platforms...
Well, what's your answer to that, Cyrus? Cyrus, what do you believe is the correct answer to your own question?
So I'm an analyst. I'd like to predict what's going to happen. I mean, my personal prediction is that in time, governments will be forced to regulate the internet, because you can't have election manipulation. You can't have a global pandemic where there's too many anti-vaxxers, because you're not going to recover from that pandemic. You have to address these issues of misinformation, and therefore government regulation is inevitable. It's a question of how they do it. And I think there's a number of ways they could do it. The obvious solution is to break up big tech. That's what government authorities always look at first when they see a big company, but that's not necessarily the right answer. That's an old world remedy to a new world problem. The real answer is to tackle how these companies control and manipulate data, and that can be tackled by a number of ways. You could revoke Section 230, as you mentioned, which would allow anyone to sue Facebook or Twitter or Google for any misinformation that they spread, for example.
Which Cyrus, let me jump in here, because I was in law school actually when Section 230 was being at first debated. I remember the early debates, and it was always, well, it's about free speech, and it's about free speech, and we get it. It is about free speech in a lot of ways, but let's be clear. These platforms, not my opinion, it's widely available, and I'm sure you would agree, can be manipulated. To your point on vaccines, saw some data the other day, like 5 accounts accounted for 15% of all global vaccine mis or disinformation. You and I could pay a troll farm somewhere in the world a couple grand and probably get a topic trending on Twitter. That's not free speech. That's all done under anonymous accounts, some people managing hundreds of accounts each. There is an area to fix here, I think, is there not? That might be good for the companies, by the way.
I think there is. I think the major problem is that social media platforms are not just places where we say hi to our friends. They're places where we get the news, and large proportions of our population get the news from Facebook, Twitter, and Google. And the problem here is a lack of accountability for the tech platforms themselves, because they're not liable for any liability if they publish misinformation. There's a lack of oversight on the tech platforms' algorithms. So, nobody actually knows what those algorithms do. And then there's a lack of data governance rules. So consumers can't just leave Facebook. They can't take their data off Facebook. So these are the 3 areas that I think regulators will inevitably tackle one day. It's a question of how fast Congress wants to move.
Shepard Smith here. Thanks for watching CNBC on YouTube.